Okay, let's talk about the next paradigm shift in LLMs, and that's about thinking of these large language models, these LLMs, as general purpose foundations or foundational models if you prefer. On these foundations, you layer on modular toolings and agents that are specialized tools targeted for specific tasks. So instead of asking ChatGPT a question like what is the stock price of XYZ, or where is the nearest pizza place, or even ask her to do a math question like 17 to the power of 7 to the power of 7. Well, this is the right answer for 10338673. I mean, just look at the number of digits, you know this is already wrong, this is already off. It looks like it started alright and then you just go and mess it up. There are countless examples on those things. For example, you can read papers about how you could ask GPT to do things like how many teeth does a person have 32, how many teeth does a math teacher has 47, what's the date today, it doesn't know the date, so it gives you some random date. What is 1982 plus 39, it says 1981, this is wrong, how can it go smaller? And they all point to the core limitations of language models, right? They don't have access to all the relevant knowledge. And so using a language model to solve things like the ones here that you see, that's generally a poor fit, right? So these are the limitations. It wouldn't know the stock price, it wouldn't know the weather, it wouldn't even know the current date. It's impossible by the design for pre-trained language models to keep up with this dynamic formation. Lack of access to proprietary information sources. Again, it doesn't have data on your own HubSpot, doesn't have data on your own CRM, your own Salesforce, your own Gmail. It doesn't have those data. So if you try to ask it, what is the total sales from this department versus the other department at the last quarter, it doesn't know how to get that because those are proprietary information sources. But essentially, why GPT consistently get these kind of things wrong is that it's not a calculator, right? First of all, it doesn't have a computation mode. What it does is that it's a language model, it generates tokens and generates text, right? So instead of asking ChatGPT to do these things, we're going to talk about this system called the MRKL, which stands for Modular Reasoning, Knowledge, and Language. So it's pronounced as miracle. Very fanciful name, but it's a simple concept. The idea is to think of language models as a textual gateway. So think of it as this is kind of the gateway, right? It's an interface where you express in words, and then your language models will pick a specialized tool, an expert tool. So it calls this an expert. So all of these are different experts. So additional experts, right? It has a calendar, it has a Wikipedia API, it has currency, it can do currency conversion, it can do weather API stuff. So you can ask it questions about what is the stock prices for Apple this morning, and it will go and find that out. And then you said, well, I'm living in Indonesia, so give it to me in my local currency. So it takes a currency API again and converts to USD to IDR, right? Then it works with databases, calculator. So it kicks it off to all of these different it has an adapter, kicks it off to one of these experts or one of these agents. We'll see how to do all of this in LangChain today. But more importantly, the lesson here is that these are extendable sets of modules. Anyone can contribute to it. You can write an API, you can make it work, you can extend onto it. So language models, they just the foundational model, they take it and then they find a specialized tool that is trained independently. This could be a web browser, calculator, a dictionary, a translator, a scheduling, calendar app, what have you, from an extendable set of modules and route the right part of the question to the right tool. And this overcomes many of the limitations of language models and allows you to build a robust system that doesn't just try to make things up or hallucinate the shit out of everything because of the limitation of just being fundamentally a text generation device. That's what it is. In fact, if you just search this up, MRKL, if you type LangChain MRKL, you'll see that there's a lot of documentation on this as well. And what an MRKL agent really does is three parts. First of all, the tools that the agent has available to you. So it decides, okay, based on this query, what are the experts that I need to call for? Maybe a calculator, maybe a dictionary, maybe a translator, maybe a currency converter, whatever, right? And then the LM chain that produces the text that is parsed in a certain way. And finally, the agent class itself. So if you're using SQL, SQL, then you will want to have the SQL agent. And that's how it does that. In terms of LangChain, the ecosystem is really, really huge. So if I click into the tools and look at the integrations, these are all the tools that are already in here and keep on adding more and more, right? So API 5, AWS Lambda, a lot of you have used that, Bing Search, Brave Search, ChatGPT plugins, DuckDuckGo Search. This is an alternative to Google, maybe a more privacy respecting search engine. Alright, so what I'm going to show you in this video, right, it would be a fantastic introduction to LangChain Agents, and we'll layer on Streamlit as well, so we have a beautiful web application running that is plugged to the web browser, the calculators, a database, and these specialized to these experts. And there are many, many agents, and we've seen some of them already. And some of them actually you've even come across in earlier videos of this LLM series as well. So we start off by building an MVP version using these tools and agents, and then I'll show you some of the more advanced use cases, but we generally be using Streamlit and we're using LangChain. That's pretty much the two things that we'll be using. Alright, so if you're ready, just go ahead and open up a new file call it whatever you want. I'm gonna call it demo 16 because all of this, this is the 16 demo. All of these from 1 to 15, all of them are organized in a nice way and kept up to date, and they're always, I just recently did a version bump, so all of this uses the latest version of LangChain and Llama Index. And if you want to find them, if you want to follow along, right, just hop over and do a fork and then clone it down to your machine from the GitHub repo. Alright, let's get into it. Now, a lot of this scaffolding, you've seen me done this before, so I really don't want to explain too much of this basic scaffolding, but I'm going to bring in the environment variable. So the way I do that is I say from.env import load.env. So what this allows me to do is to just call this, and it will find for a file called .env file, and it's going to look at all the environment variables that are in this file, and it's going to load that in. So I can call them without having to put them into my code, and that's nice. It creates a separation. This is my environment variables, this is my code. I commit the code to GitHub to version control, but I leave it out of anything, right? It's just your secret keys and tokens should be private at all times. Now, I just said that we're going to be using LangChain, so let's bring in LangChain and start working with it. So let's start off by doing LangChain LMS import OpenAI. And since this is all about agents, working with agents, I'm going to start off with a simple example. I'm going to be using search engine to say if I write a query, don't try to make things up. Instead, go and consult Google search engine or Bing or DuckDuckGo, one of those, right? And find the answer for me, right? So if I ask a question like, will Donald Trump be indicted in the latest prosecution case against him, right? So essentially, is Donald Trump going to be successful in defending his case there, or will he not, right? So if I want to ask a question like that, I don't want the language model to make stuff up. What I want it to do is to go to the search engine, punch that question in there, look up at the news articles, form an opinion, and then come back to me with that opinion, with an informed opinion, and not just make stuff up based on, like the last trading data was like 2021 or something. Don't do that, alright? So this is what I wanted to do. So I'm gonna actually be using the tools to do that, and one of the tools I'm gonna be using is the search. So let's bring that in. I'm gonna say langchain.agents import load tools, right? So there's the load agent, there's the load tools, there's the load Hugging Face tools, but we're gonna be using load tools. Now let's go on and create our LLM, right? So we already have OpenAI, so let's do that. This is something you've seen in many part of my videos. So really I don't even know, like I shouldn't have to explain all of this again. If you've been following this series, this is like what, the 13th or the 14th video. This is a lot of repetition already. So you've seen me done this before. Nothing really new here. Temperature is kind of like how random do you want a response to be. If you want something to be highly accurate, then you want to set it up to be as close to 0 as possible, right? If you want something to be more random, add a bit more variation in its response and stuff, then up the temperature to be 0.8, 0.9, maybe even 1, alright? So let's start from 0 and then let's see if it's not good, we can tune it up, right? Now I want this streaming to be true, so the texts are returned to me in a streaming manner, so that they return one at a time, so I don't have to wait for all of it to be generated before it returns back to me. And finally, I'm going to have OpenAI API key. Now this is where people like to put in something like this and punch at a lot of things. I don't want to do that. So what I want to do is I'm going to say take the OS, find the environment, and then what? Just locate OpenAI API key. So what this means is that it expects that in your env file, you will have something like the same thing. If it's all capital case, you want to do that, and you expect to have the keys here, right? It's just going to read that value from your env file, and it's going to pass it right in here. That's it. Very simple. And finally, I want to have a tools here to say load tools, and then here I can have a bunch of tools. You can have different tools that you want to work with, right? You can have the web browser, the calculator, translator, all of this stuff. Now let's start off really simple by just putting in, let's pick a tool, and I will go into DuckDuckGo search, and I will use this one, alright? So in LangChain, the instructions are really simple as well. I package everything into it. This is why LangChain is fantastic. So from LangChain.tools, import DuckDuckGo search run, and then do this, and then you can do search.run, and then you can ask for the first name. It will do that for you. So that's a useful concept. Another useful concept is that we will also need to bring in the zero-shot React description because we're using a text LLM. So we will first try this. This is basically the MRKL, right? The Miracle Agent for LLMs. So the Miracle Agent, this uses the React framework based on the description of tools to decide what action to take. If you try to understand from your natural language query, you see that's the text, can I look at that text, make up my mind about what tools, what specialized tools to use, alright? Which agent should I call? So this is the way you would call it. You say agent type and then zero-shot React description. There are a few other choices you can have. If you're using a chat model, you want to try to use memory, you can pass this in, if not, try this one. But since it says if you're using a text LM, that's us, first try this one. Alright, so we're going to be using this. So it goes by the name of Miracle Agent for LMS, so MRKL, or it just go by the name of zero shot React description. And this is kind of the simple description as well. An agent is the stateless wrapper around an agent prompt chain, such as Miracle. So agent prompt chain is kind of the one, it's kind of like the commander. It's like, hey, I'm the commander, I'm gonna pick up which agent to kick off, right? And that is your agent prompt chain, that is your Miracle. That takes care of formatting tools into the prompt, and then as well as passing the response obtained from the chat model, and then it return the response. So it have to sort of decide the action and the corresponding action input. So it says, well, given what you want to achieve, this is the right action for that. This is the right action for the other, right? So that's kind of what it does. Get back into code. And so apart from load tools, I will also need initialize agent to initialize my Miracle agent. And I will just use agent type. And then after tools, this is what I need. I need agent, initialize agent. So if you look at the signature here, it asks for tools and then LLM and then an agent. Alright, so we need the tools, the LLM, and then the agent. What would be our tools? The tools would just be the tools that we created right up there. Okay. In here, let's start off by doing the DDG search. That's the DuckDuckGo search. We talked about that already. So we're gonna say that's the first one. Then the LLM, we also created that right up here. So let's say LLM equals to LLM. And then finally the agent. Now agent is when we're gonna use the agent type. On this, it has a few here that we've seen: the chat conversational, the chat zero, conversational React description, OpenAI functions. And what I want to be using is the zero shot React description. So this is the Miracle. A lot of this, there are documentation. Admittedly, the documentation is not always very complete, not very comprehensive. It gives you like code snippets, run this and it does that. Then you need to read the paper to really understand what it does. But I'm trying to keep the video within a reasonable time frame. So I'm not going to try to elaborate too much or labor too much on those points. So these are the three different things and you're good to go. What I will do is, as well, is I said that I want to have this as a nice web application. So to have this as a nice Streamlit application, I will need to bring in Streamlit. So you want to install Streamlit if you don't have it already. So we're going to say import Streamlit as st, and close out the sidebar, Control B to do that. And now we just have to wrap everything into Streamlit. So you could say something like Streamlit.chat message. First of all, the user have to write the prompt. So user have to ask a query, right? So I have the user, and I want the user to write the prompt. So change right on there, and then I want to pass in the prompt. But prompt is still not created at this point, so we need to sort of say if prompt, then we just assign and use the walrus operator to say if we assign, and if this is successful, then we just put everything into chat input. Alright, so what this will do is that this walrus operator, I think is Python 3.8. So Python 3.8 above, you have that. It's saying that try to assign this into prompt, and if it's successful, then call this. And then what happens here is that you first ask for the user to enter a prompt, and then you can create a context manager and say with Streamlit. We're not really learning about Streamlit, so I'm not gonna go into all the details about Streamlit. Now you say this is the assistant. If you watch my other parts of the video, you know that generally we call the user, and the GPT role, the LLM role, usually we call it assistant, right? So the user is kind of like you're the guy, you're trying to ask it to do things for you. And assistant is kind of the GPT guy, the LLM itself, right? Whatever you use, if you use GPT, if you use BARD, if you use some open source LLM model, that's your assistant. So we want the assistant to then say, all of this wrap into a context manager, and the reason we do that is because all of this will fall under the assistant. So everything that you see from line 18 onwards, that's all of this is gonna be a chat message that is responsible by the assistant. This is all done under assistant role. The user is just here. Just write your prompt. That's all you do, right? So what do we want? Maybe we wanted to first say, oh, try to tell me that you're actually in this loop already. So we can do a print statement, feed an emoji into it, and then say that I'm thinking. You can just use a simple console log and say, hey, I'm in the loop. We need a simple callback handler to say that if LangChain is successful executes, we need a callback. We need to keep out a function. So I'm gonna also have to bring in LangChain.callbacks import Streamlit callback handler. Say this is the callback. Finally, we said that now you can have a response. And this is something you've seen me done before, which is agent.run. And agent.run is really just a result from here. And it says that, okay, execute this. If you successfully execute that, you're going to get some result. And with the result, you handle that into this callback, which is the Streamlit handle callback. So this is what we want to do. We want to say run it with your prompt. And your prompt is basically from whatever the user enter in here, right? So this is kind of like whatever is written, right? That's your prompt. Run that prompt. And then when the function returns, this is what you want to pass it back. Alright, so callback And then finally you can write it back. So kind of like what you did here in the right. So now it's done. Earlier you said it's thinking, but now you're not doing thinking anymore. You're already done with that. So you just want to print out response. You could still have another console log if you want to, but really just print out response. Alright, so 25 lines of code, very simple. Let's save everything in here. Let's activate our environment. You want to make sure you have Streamlit and stuff installed, right? So LangChain and Streamlit, that's the two things you need. And I will just say Streamlit run. And because this is demo16.py, I'm going to say demo16.py. And so sure enough, you get the nice Streamlit interface, just a simple user prompt, alright? So this is whatever you want to pass it. So to see that all our code works, we want to ask a question that we'll have to rely on using the DuckDuckGo search. Or if you don't want DuckDuckGo, use Bing, use any search engine, use Google if you want to, right? I'm just using DuckDuckGo. So let's start off with the first question. So I could ask this, for example, what are the names of the kids? I could say of the current American president, but it sounds like that's too easy. You didn't even have to go and Google that up. Usually GPT would know the answer to that. So I'm gonna say maybe change it to, I believe 45th is the former president, Donald Trump. 46 is Joe Biden. So 44th would be Barack Obama. So I'm gonna say 44th president of the United States, okay, or of America. So what are the names of the kids of the 44th president of the United States? Let's do that. And so it runs thinking. There you go. So first it says thinking. This is where is this from? It's just a fancy print statement, alright? So take that, ask Streamlit to write something, write thinking with the brain emoji, that's it. And then we handle the response. So let's go back to the prompt here. And so your zero-shot React description, first have to look at this and say, okay, what action do I take, right? It has to decide what action to take. He needs to say, well, to answer this question, I need to first know who's the 44th president of the United States. And I need to find out who the 44th president of the United States is. Action. So this is kind of what it's doing here, right? It says, I need to decide what action to take. And so the action is to do a DuckDuckGo search. Okay, that's fair. The action input is the 44th president of the United States. So we need to pass from all of this. It says, what is the relevant input I need to use to pass into this action? Then he finds out the answer, right? So here, the presidency of the United States of America, and he finds out that it's actually Barack Obama, the 44th president of the United States. Okay, fair. Then once it's done, it kicks off the second action. It says, now that I have that, I now need to find out the names of the kids of the 44th president. So again, it kicks off DuckDuckGo search. Input is the kids of Barack Obama. And then to most of the world, Barack and Michelle Obama are the former presidents and first lady of the United States. But to daughters, Malia and Sasha Obama. Alright? So now it's completed. I now know the final answer, Malia and Sasha Obama. Let's, I know the answer is correct, but let's just Barack Obama, kid's name, search that up. So there's the name, Malia, and Obama, and Sasha Obama. So that's correct. So you know it's not hallucinating. It's not making up some stuff based on some pre-trained data from 5 years ago or 4 years ago. It's not doing that. What it's doing is to execute this set of actions, and then using the set of actions to arrive at that answer, right? So I could also do the same thing here. I could say, well, maybe top 3 shareholders of NVIDIA. So thinking, and then search top 3 shareholders of NVIDIA. I need to find out who the top 3 shareholders of NVIDIA are, and then I do a search, and then it finds out all of this stuff. Look at that. That's a lot of information that you need to parse. But it summarized that back for you. It says, I now know the final answer. So instead of giving you all of these tags, right, it gives you this. The top 3 shareholders of NVIDIA, the Vanguard Group, the BlackRock, and Fidelity. Jensen, which is Jensen, that's his English name, are the top individual shareholders. So again, you can search that up really quickly. Top shareholders of NVIDIA. Go to CNN if you want to, but here are the individual. So Jensen, Collett, and Mark Stevens. And so these are all correct. And then let's look at the corporate shareholders. So let's click on this one. And here are the corporate shareholders. So that's the individual at the bottom here, but the top 10 are corporate shareholder. So Vanguard, Fidelity, and BlackRock. So again, we got it right. So Vanguard, BlackRock, and Fidelity. So what you have here is a very powerful system. Instead of trying to make up words on its own, it's trying to just use it as a foundational model that we have, foundational layer. We talked about that before at the beginning of this video, and then it kicks off the right action to perform a sequence of actions and then derive an answer from that sequence of actions that it's taking. Alright, so that's good. Now, if you know a bit of Streamlit, you can also make this a bit prettier. You can add a few, maybe title, a bit customization, you can do that. So let me terminate the current session. I'm gonna slightly customize this a bit, but I'm gonna save you time. I'm not gonna write each one of them line by line. So I'm gonna paste in what I've already had while doing the demo earlier. So I'm gonna remove all of this content, but this is very similar. So I'm gonna show you at the top, it's still very similar stuff. So previously you see me do the load tools, and then in the initialize agent, before that I have my tools equals to load tools. Before that you have me doing this, right? So instead of doing that now, what you see me do is I actually remove that and I'm using this, just .go search run. This is similar to what you have in the docs. If you look at the docs, this is kind of the same thing from LangChain tools, import go search run, and then just call it. Alright, so that's the first thing I moved. I also added a title and a configuration, so I'm just adding this page title and a page icon so that makes it a little bit prettier. This is really unnecessary if you don't want to. I added also a sidebar. So look, if you notice, a lot of the changes are mainly on the front end side of things. I'm saying that the first thing, right, I want to have a title, I want to have a sidebar. So what it does here is just add a simple text input, right? So my sidebar has only one input, and that's just an OpenAI API key. So I'm allowing my user, anyone who's using my web app, to just allow the guy to enter his own key and instead of using my key, right? So I can launch this web app and anyone could use my app as long as they supply their own key. And I pass in a type equals to password. Why? In order to mask it so that it's not shown in plain text, right? So that's just maybe better hygiene. And this has some form of recency. It's pretty recent. I will put in a question of like, will Donald Trump be indicted? But don't make this political in the comment messages, okay? I'm not even American actually, so I'm putting this query so that this is very recent news, right? I'm recording this will go out maybe on the first week of July, and by then we still haven't found out if he's gonna actually successfully defend his case or not. If this were trained on a simple LLM, let's say GPT-3 or GPT-4, right, it wouldn't know the answer. But what it needs to know is to catch up with the most recent news. So I find that a good placeholder to be used. So this is from OpenAI API key. This is the text input. But if this is still empty by the time you hit on the prompt, then it says please add your OpenAI key to continue. And then you use this. If this is successful, then it goes in here and plus it in here. The rest is exactly the same. So initialize agent, the tools is the same, LM is the same, zero shot react description is the same, the model name is the same. In here, I took away the console log, but everything else is the same kind of, right? So I'm going to just run all of this, and this is now demo16.py. So let's go ahead and run it again. And now you should see that there is a sidebar, there is a title, and all of this is coming from here, right? You have your page config, you have the title, and then you have the sidebar. So we see that it's working. And here it has the how can I help you? And this is also what I mentioned earlier, is basically the default. And who should write this default? It should be the assistant writing this default, right? Shouldn't be the user because that would be crazy. So here I'm saying the assistant is going to ask you, assistant again means the LLM, it's going to ask you, what can I do for you? And so now we need an API key, and if you have your API key, you can just go in there and punch in your own. Because of the type equals password, the HTML form is going to hide it by default. So that's nice. And now it's going to be ready to take our commands. So suppose you want to ask, will Donald Trump be indicted? Now if it's not doing the Google search, it's not going to be able to handle this query. It's going to make up stuff. Donald Trump has been indicted on 37 counts and has pleaded not guilty to the charges. Alright, so at least it gets the answer. But how does it do that? Well, it first search. I should search for current news or updates on whether Donald Trump will be indicted. And then there's a search. And then this is Donald Trump. And in fact, he even went further. I mean, this is a it's definitely a she. So instead of actually using this as is, he actually went on and formatted that a bit and said search for Donald Trump indictment news. And here, the charges against former President Donald Trump, who was indicted by a federal grand jury this week, yada yada, 37, and this is correct. This is the latest news anyway, we don't know. And again, please don't make this political. I don't know, I'm not American myself, right? But I just need something that is very recent, right? There is also maybe another thing that's very recent, if you've been following the news, is maybe, have you found the wreckage for Titan submersible? And maybe just do that. And again, you try to do a search, Titan submersible wreckage. So yes, the wreckage of the Titan submersible has been found. Based on the search result, it seems that the wreckage of the Titan submersible has been found and there were fatalities involved. Alright, so you see, what it's doing here is that it kicks off that search, right? And now you have the OpenAI key on the sidebar, and that's pretty nice, pretty neat. Now, if you were to follow along the documentation, that's pretty lengthy, you can read up more about this stuff. But I'm just going to hop to the last part of this, because I don't want the video to be too long. I want it to be ideally like 10-15 minutes. So I'm going to show you all of this. Let me run through the app for you, and then let me give you a quick look at the code itself, right? So it says you can ask one of the sample questions or enter your API key in the sidebar to ask your own custom questions. So we have a sidebar. This is the same thing. Here's the API key. You can enter that and you can ask your own question, or you can ask one of the sample question. Now the sample question itself, Here it's set up, there is a few, like there's two questions here already. So the first one is, what is the full name of the artist who recently released an album called The Storm Before the Calm, and are they in the Fubar database? If so, yada yada. So let's submit the question. If so, what albums of theirs are in the Fubar database? So now instead of doing the search and kicking off something like a DuckDuckGo of Google or Bing, instead of doing that, it's now realizing that the action is going to be a bit different. So I need to find out the artist's full name. Okay, so it first have to rely on search still. So this is the same as what we've seen before. You still need to find out, because here we didn't give it the name of the artist. We only asked it to figure that out. What is the full name of the artist who recently released an album called The Storm Before the Calm? Alright, so I need to find out the artist's full name, and then I need to search the Fubar database for the album. So the first one is to first find out who is the artist for The Storm Before the Calm. Defines out the answer. That's Alanis Morissette. I don't know if I pronounced the name correctly. You then take this name and then you pass into the second action. Now, instead of actually using the search, it says I should look at the database. So I now need to search the Fubar database for Alanis Morissette's album. And then here's the action input. What albums of Alanis are in the Fubar database? Then it generates the SQL query for you. Now, if you wonder how it's doing that and stuff, GPT 3.5 and GPT 4, they're pretty good at going from text to SQL. In fact, I have a video covering that. If you want to watch that video, there is a on my LM playlist, I have one that goes into how you could write natural language, and then you can query your CSV, you can query your database, and it would kicks off an agent and execute the query for you and retrieve the results back for you. So here it figures out that it needs to write this query. So select title from album, inner join artist on album. And it doesn't just need to know what kind of query it needs to generate, it needs to know what chain to look at. So if I show you the code for this is the SQL database, the SQL database. Actually, both of this stuff, you have seen me done this in my earlier video. So I have a video that goes into like text to SQL and database and stuff. If you've actually been following along this path, you've seen me done this before. So this is from the SQL database chain, which we bring in from here. Alright. I also bring in the math chain because I also wanted to do math and stuff. So remember how I said earlier, when you use GPT-3 and you ask it a question, like say 17 to the power of 7, for example, you really don't know the answer to that. Sometimes you get it right, but a lot of times you get it wrong. And it's not the kind of things that you want to roll your dice with and say, oh, just try and generate text and try to tell me what the answer you think would be. That's generally not the right tool for that. What you want the LM to do is to not try to solve that, but go and kick off another chain to solve that, get the result, right? So the expert, in this case the expert with the calculator, get the answer and feed it back to your LM. You want it to do that. So here we have the search. These are all the tools. We have the LM, this is very similar stuff. Then we have the search, this is the DuckDuckGo search wrapper. And then we have the math chain, then we have the database chain, and then we have this. And then we just have to pass in all of the tools into the tools. This is something you've seen earlier in the two or three demos. But here, instead of an array with just a length of 1, we have an array of a list of things. So here we have the search, we have the calculator, and the Fubar DB. Here I'm saying that the search, this is going to kick off search.run, which is from here. This is going to kick off dbchain.run, and this is going to kick off lmfchain.run. But you can add a description to sort of remind yourself what this is doing. Alright. The database itself is actually in my folder. Again, all of this is on my GitHub. You can go and download them. Just do a git clone. So I have the, there's the assets, there's the audio, there's the book, there's the DB. So look for this DB, and then this is what it's looking for. Alright. So it's going to look at this DB, and this is called a DB path. If you just say go in there, use SQLite, find the DB path, and then form a connection there, and just execute on that. Let's go back to our web app. So now, once it executes this SQL query, it finds out that the albums of Alanis in this Fubar database are Jack, Later, Pill. And now it says complete. I now know the full answer, or the final answer. The artist who recently released an album called The Storm Before the Calm is Alanis Morissette, and the albums of hers in the Fubar database are Jack, Later, Pill. Okay, so that's pretty nice, right? So let's look at another question here. Who is Leo DiCaprio's girlfriend? What is the current age raised to the 0.43 power? So here it's trying to test two things at the same time. First, test the search, and then test the math chain. So it needs to be able to do the math here. So let's submit the question. If you're only using GPT, you're probably going to fail here. So, but here, now that we have the math chain, it's probably going to be able to do a reasonable job at that. So, search who is Leo DiCaprio's girlfriend. So it forms its thought process. It says, in order to do this thing, I need to first solve this problem, right? Who is Leo DiCaprio's girlfriend? So there are 4 different actions here. So I need to find out who Leo DiCaprio's girlfriend is, and then calculate her age raised to the 0.43 power, and then search. Leo was also linked to Megan Roche, allegedly entered a relationship with 19-year-old model Eden Polanyi in February 2023. I'm very bad at names, because you probably know I don't live in the US. So I'm very out of touch with the Hollywood and the pop culture and stuff. How old is Eden? Right, search. And so 19 years old, all right. And you can verify that, right? You can say, how old is Eden? Israeli Jewish, 19 years old. Okay. And then what? Calculate. Calculate what? 19 to the power of 0.43, and then use a calculator. In fact, it doesn't really use a calculator. It uses the num expression value. So it uses Python to do that for you, and then gets the answer 3.547. And then complete. I now know the full answer, or the final answer. Leo DiCaprio's girlfriend is Eden Polanyi, and her current age raised to the 0.43 power is this. Now, if you want to ask your own question, these are all cash. So, and you know they are cash because here I actually pass in the pickle. So here I pass in the pickle. I mean, these are from a docs. These are not my example. The first and second, I modify them. I make them easy to condense them within 10 minutes to show you a quick demo. But this one here is pretty much just, a lot of them I just copy and paste from a docs, and then I just have to change everything into a database and stuff so that I can show you in this one file. And so what you see here is the question, the query. So this is the input query, right? This is the user input query. So this is whatever user write. So you save them into a variable called user input. If this is already being cached before, if this is in a save session, then just tell me that you're playing save sessions. So here you see that in the console log, you're saying playing save session. So confirming that it's actually using a cache here. And that's basically a pickle, right? And then finally print the answer and just run it through. Otherwise, just run it normally. So this is the initialized agent. This is something we've seen before. So very, very similar, right? Like 80-90% similar to our examples, except here we added the save sessions idea of like, hey, you don't actually need to rerun the whole thing, just use the playback callbacks. So the main new idea that was introduced is this area of playback callbacks. The rest, all of this stuff, you've seen me in other videos, you've seen me done that earlier in this video, or in other videos, you've seen those things before. I'm really just trying to introduce caching to it. If you want to learn more about caching, I have a video completely about caching, all the different caching strategies in LangChain. If you want to study more about cache and introduce caching to your own LLM pipelines, then just go and watch that video itself. And so there you have it. I said the video is going to be short. I hope that I managed to cut it down to a reasonably short time. A lot of people have been telling me that the videos are a little bit too long now. So I'm keeping it to hopefully everything done within 15-20 minutes. If you want to see more, I can go into a more deep dive and stuff. But here is a really simple tutorial on how to combine LangChain agents and stuff and put them into a Streamlit web app. Because I think I have a lot of questions about that before. It's like, okay, this is cool. I don't want to run it on my computer only. I want to have it as a web app so that people can use it and stuff. So this is kind of the way you do it using Streamlit. If you want to see it in Flask, in Django, there's also a lot of other resources to find out about that. But if you want to see me do it, then just let me know in the comment sections. Alright, so I hope you learned something new. I'll see you in the next video. Goodbye.